am here with Mike McCowan. He is the General Manager of Godly Play Resources. Mike, it's so good to be with you today.
Thank you.
So if we had the joy of having this conversation in person in a coffee shop, what would your drink of choice be?
Well, see, that's where I'm going to show my age and how boring I can be. It's going to be black coffee,
Yes.
which I am a big fan of.
Yes. Well, I am drinking black coffee as well, except I add a little peppermint oil. That's my
Oh
treat
my.
to it.
My wife likes flavored coffees.
Does she?
Every now and then, for some reason when we're in the mountains, it tastes good, but
Yeah.
it's been a while.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, you are in Ashland, Kansas with our Godly Play resources out there. And I'd love for you to share what your work with Godly Play looks like right now. And then we'll talk about how you got here.
Well, of course, we're in the big middle of COVID, so things have been radically different for us in the last 6 months. An extreme amount of godly play in the home, stories of God in the home, also the DIYs. Churches are taking advantage of being able to send stuff home with their kids since they can't have Sunday school, and looks like it's going to be a while. So we've had to make that change, and so it's been different. It really has been. My history with godly play is I was actually introduced to through Jerome's brother Tom. I was doing some cabinet work for him, which was my trade, and I built some cabinets for Tom. And at that time, it was in the summer of 1990. He was working on the first catalog for resources. And he kind of introduced me to it, showed me some things. And it wasn't long after that, he asked me if I'd be interested in developing a product for him. And it was the calendar, the church calendar. And I did it. And that was in 90. And my business continued to grow as remodeling here in Ashland. And I picked up an item or two. Sometimes they'd have problems, issues with them. And I started doing the Mystery of Easter and the liturgical furniture. And it was actually a few years after that that I'd even met Jerome. We used to have what we referred to as the after Christmas party. And Tom would have it for all the vendors, and his brother would be in town. And so that's when I first met him. And as we all know, godly play just continued to grow, and so did my business. And anyway, it was in 2001, and they were working on volume 4. And Jerome would write me letters, and they were basically just problem-solving things we had with materials. And he wanted me to develop the upper room temple, the upper room synagogue. And I was getting so busy with my own work. And anyway, he was actually on the board of directors at the bank here in town, Stock Growers, that the foundation uses. His grandfather founded that bank. And so he would come back monthly from Houston. And he wrote me a letter, and it wasn't really a scolding. It was just kind of rattling my cage, saying, where are we on this product? I'm going to be in town next month, which was, I think it was February. And he said, I'd like to talk to you about it. So at that time, I decided to quit building products. And it was just a hard decision because I was so busy with my own work. And this was kind of a thorn in the side because, when they needed products, they needed products. Mm-hmm. And so he arranged a meeting with me, and he was going to show me the lesson. And he had a prototype, which he had brought from Italy with him. And I just decided I was going to go tell him this is it. So anyway, I walk across the street and down the block to the resources office, and Jerome and his beautiful smile welcomes me in, and there sits his lesson in the middle of the floor. And the first thing he tells me, he says, well, sit down and I'll give you this lesson. And I looked around, well, there was no chairs. And keep in mind, I had no idea what godly play was about. I'd never seen a lesson, knew nothing of the philosophies, techniques that he had developed over the years. And so he sat on the floor and he looked up at me and says, please sit down. So I thought, this is crazy. But I sat down, and if you've ever had the privilege of having Jerome tell you a story, you know what a wonderful storyteller he is. And he was in his prime, top of his game at that time. And he starts telling me this story, and how it ties Christianity with Judaism and the Old Testament with the New Testament. In the meantime, he's telling me the problems with the material itself. And so I was just mesmerized by it. And, you know, I'll never forget walking away from that story, and my mind was just going a million miles an hour. How can I improve this for me? How can I fix this? And I totally forgot about quitting. So that was the beginning, and that was really where Jerome and I's relationship started, and become more personal, working with products and stuff. And then he coaxed me into going to a training. I really can't remember. I think that was in 2004 or 5. So that's my history. That's how I become a follower of godly play, and I just love it. I always dreamed when I was a little kid of being a woodworker anyway. And, you know, now I'm really a woodworker. I'm not a cabinet builder. I'm not a remodeler. I'm a woodworker. So in 2008, after the foundation was formed, they promoted me to the general manager of resources. And I oversee the daily operations and work with the ladies there, and I work with the other vendors is a big part of it. And I continue to help develop products and things, and improve what we have. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. It's been a very interesting trip. It really has.
You've been there really from the beginning.
Really, it has, you know, and it's, you know, the friends I've made, the vendors I've worked with, you know, it's interesting. You know, we kid one of the girls at work, Tika Arnold, had her first child this past May. And that's actually the 4th generation of people that work. Well, that's what we call her. She hasn't started yet, but
not quite ready.
Tika's grandmother-in-law and her mother-in-law and her, they've all been vendors for it. So
wow.
You know, it's fun. My kids grew up in the shop. Anybody who's familiar with the calendar of the church, the 52 blocks that go in the circle, that was both of them. That was one of their first jobs, was sanding those blocks.
Was it? Wow.
Yeah. And to this day, they can do it with the best of them. So good times, good times.
Yeah. So you said at the beginning, you're doing a lot of work trying to develop different materials to support families at home. What does the process look like as you?
Well, at first it was with Jerome, and Jerome is very artistic. He is a great historian. He expects his materials to reflect that history, you know, to be correct and stuff. So he and his wife Thea, I honestly can't tell you how many years they worked, but it was decades that they worked on these lessons. And, you know, he would do sketches of, you know, what he wanted to go with it, and, you know, how it should be. And godly play is heavily Montessori influenced, and that's hands-on. That's something that, you know, that's very important to Jerome. So that's just how we would attack these things. You know, we would work on them. And I can't tell you how many times, you know, I come up with a prototype and he said, oh, I love it. And then, you know, 2 days later, he said, well, after further thought, and we change it again. We just in volume 8 started producing the cathedral, the church.
Mm-hmm.
And that lesson was actually, I did those prototypes in 2007.
Okay.
And we worked on it literally for years.
Oh.
And, you know, I think I'd have it figured out, then he would change something. So he was a challenge to work with, you know, but thankfully he always had the vision and the idea of what he wanted. And so it was easy for me, you know, I just had to make the product, you know, and try to make it affordable as I possibly could, which sometimes is very hard with Jerome. You know, he has an eye for detail, the touch, the heft of it whenever, you know, the teachers and the children or anybody who touches these products, you know, it's very important. And so 2008, whenever I became general manager, and we were working, we were starting to review products and change them. So, and it was a very busy time. Jerome had a lot to deal with his family and some health issues. So he turned it over to Cheryl Miner. And Cheryl was always my backup anyway, because, you know, she could translate what Jerome was trying to tell me. And so finally one day I just said, would you rather I just start dealing with Sherry? And he said, oh, with Cheryl. And he goes, oh, please, please. So it was kind of the end of my involvement with developing with Jerome. And since 8, it's been with Cheryl.
Okay.
And we have done, has spent time here in Ashland. We've went over every lesson, every piece that we produce, and made a lot of changes, you know, doing some updates. Then we went through volume 8, and it's quite a process. You know, a lot of what I call the artistic part of it. Connie and Teresa will work on those things in the office, you know, and they get on the internet looking for things, and then from there we try to develop what we're looking for. The latest ones have been our, I'm not for sure what they're going to call it yet, Heroes of Color, or I don't think they're going to call it Saints, but anyway, we just went through that process.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of fun. And I literally, I'm thinking, I don't think I had anything to do with the products themselves. I know we did a little piano, and we did a bus, and Tika and Connie developed those for us. You know, so.
Yeah.
And so it's a fun process. It's just a challenge that you enjoy.
Yeah. And yeah, it seems like you're continually doing that.
We are, and if we're not developing something, we're changing something.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah.
What's the greatest joy in the work that you do?
You know, I think it's hearing the stories, and I have a good relationship with a number of trainers, and you know, now the missioners, and you know, just the fellow staff, and it's being a woodworker. I think a big deal of it is it's just gratifying. You know, you see what you've done, and that's probably one of the favorite thing about it. Well, that's what it's like, developing and making products, and then you get to hear the stories. You know, and a lot of them are just hilarious, and you know, it's just been a big part of my life, you know, and it's like I say, I hope my wife won't shoot me. She's here having lunch, but I used to have to be careful because she's a banker, and her job can be very stressful. And you know, I'd come home at night just on fire with how much fun I'd had at work and what we had done, you know. And sometimes it was, I don't want to hear it. No, it's just part of growing together. But
yeah. Well, I've heard you talk about the joy of seeing products you've made.
Oh yes,
around the world being used, and
you do, and it's you know, and then, you know, people that you're introduced to, then they'll they'll bring it up. Oh, you
So,
make the art, don't you? And I said, yes, I do. And so, we always have to talk about that.
uh-huh.
But also, we're very particular because in the beginning, especially, and we still do, we've always encouraged people to make their products,
Mhm.
and to help them get Godly Play started in their church. And there's millions of wonderful craftsmen around the world that do this for their churches. But whenever I see pictures of classrooms, I'm always, looking at, is that mine or is that a copy? So anyway,
Uh,
it used to kind of bother me, but it doesn't anymore.
uh, well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been such a joy to get to know you, and
Yeah, I
um,
can't wait till we can meet. It's
I know. Oh gosh,
you know,
it's hard to know when that will happen again.
yeah,
Hopefully,
you know,
yeah,
next summer,
yeah.
I've made it this far. I'm saying,
I know, right?
if we can just start getting back together next summer, I'll be
Yeah,
fine.
it'll make it that much sweeter.
Sure.